Fire with me.
There we go. Okay, welcome to everyone who's joining the webinar. We're just going to give it a second for everyone to start joining, and we will get started very shortly. While we are waiting, and actually let me go ahead and share my screen so everyone can go ahead and see the poll that I'm about to launch. One moment while we get set up here. There we go. All right, great. You guys can all see my screen, right? Perfect. Okay, cool. Well, I'm going to launch the first of our polls while we're waiting for everyone else to join. So this is going to be a theme that we talk about a lot in the webinar. So don't be shy. I don't know if you can see the webinar, but the poll, but don't be shy. What's your average journalist response rate to story pitches? Is it 10%, 0 to 10%, 25%, 50%, 75%, or do they just always respond to you? Okay,
they always respond to me. Just kidding.
Well,
you're Martin.
No,
Martin,
that's not true.
We had someone on one of our webinars who was telling us that he gets, not only do they respond to him, he gets inbound requests. People are reaching out to him and saying, we need stories about this. It was crazy. And then he shared all the tips there. So anyone that wants that afterwards, just message me and I'll send you the recording for that, because that was fascinating.
Well, I find if it's bad news, you get lots of requests.
That's true too. Wow, so the overwhelming majority of people are saying 25% response rate. I'll let the last couple trickle in right now. All right, we'll end that over there. So I think, if you can see the result, oh, 1 second, now you can see the results. So the results are 10%, 37% of you said you get about 10% response rate, 53% say 25%. I see. Nobody says that everyone responds, so that actually supports what we think, and obviously how PR people behave. So that's great. We'll give this one more second for people to join, and then we will kick it off.
There's either some incredibly successful PR people here, or a lot of people in denial, or a lot of liars. Just kidding. But we'll unpack a lot of this data during the webinar, and we have some interesting insights for you all.
Yeah, and by the way, kudos to whoever of you are getting the 50% response rate, because that seems pretty solid. Okay, cool. I'm going to stop sharing this now. So if you want any of the results afterwards, just message me and I'm happy to share them. Okay, cool. Well, let's then kick this off. So, all right. We're going to get into the webinar now. Welcome everyone again. Today is really exciting for the Propel team as we just launched our Q3. Oh wait, I'm going to skip this over here. We just launched our Q3 Media Barometer today. It's the new, if you're new to the barometer, it's a white paper we release each quarter with research findings by anonymously analyzing hundreds of thousands of real pitches that PR people send to journalists. And we're able to find out all kinds of impactful trends about how different types of pitches perform and how PR people are getting better earned media coverage, which we're going to discuss later. We're going to discuss the latest on what's working and what's not in today's webinar. So a bit of housekeeping before we get started. We're just going to do a couple quick introductions and background of Propel. We're going to go through the latest journalist engagement rates, elements of the perfect pitch in Q2 2022. We're going to assess, and then we're going to be assessing the state of PR pitching today. And then we're going to leave the end of the webinar open for Q&A, questions that we've gotten before and questions that at any point, if you do have any, feel free to submit them in the Q&A button below. Okay, cool. Now, this is the part I like the most, is the introductions. So I'm Aaron Friedman. I'm the VP of Marketing here at Propel. And with me today, I have Martin Waxman. Martin is a digital social media and communications expert with roots in PR and creative arts. He conducts AI research, leads custom tailored social media and communications workshops and training for organizations, and teaches social media best practices. He's also a co-host of the Inside PR podcast, a past chair of PRSA Counselors Academy, and past president of CPRS Toronto. He developed the Digital Strategy and Communications Management Certificate at the University of Toronto School of Continuing Studies and teaches several courses there, among many other impressive feats. Welcome, Martin. It's really exciting. It's really exciting to have you here.
Thank you, Aaron. It's great to be here. Great to be with you and Zach and to unpack the results. And if you don't mind, I just one past student from U of T who just graduated and two current students from the McMaster Syracuse Master of Communications program are here. So I just want to give them a quick shout out. Amber, Denise, and Katrina, hello. Good to see you.
Awesome. Welcome all of you. And also a man who needs no introduction, our fearless leader, Zach Cutler. Zach is a comms veteran, data enthusiast, serial entrepreneur, and angel investor. He founded Propel after running his own New York-based communications firm, Cutler, one of the top tech-focused agencies in New York, and was the agency of record in the US for 70 tech startups, many of which are decacorns, unicorns, and many additional that IPO'd or were acquired in the hundreds of millions. He ran Cutler for 9 years and identified this need for innovation within the industry, selling his agency in order to pursue Propel. And his dream of moving the industry forward, he was named by Forbes as one of the 20 entrepreneurs shaking up the New York tech scene. Welcome, Zach, and welcome both.
Thanks, Aaron. I don't know how fearless I am, but thanks for the intro.
Fearless in my book. So a little bit about Propel. Propel was founded in 2019 and launched as a CRM for PR, or what we call a PRM. And since then, we've rolled out many additional features to the core part of our platform, including the only native Gmail and Outlook email pitch plugins, business outcomes from PR, so you can measure the ROI from your PR campaigns, as well as pitching preferences and AI-powered recommendations, so you can understand the top days of the week and the times that journalists like to be pitched. We're headquartered in Tel Aviv, and we have teams across the globe in New York, London, Miami, and we even have a team driving around the US in an RV. Propel has over 150 customers, including Edelman, Microsoft, US Air Force, Real Chemistry, and other leading brands and agencies. So with that, I'm going to pass it over to Zach so we can dive into the data a little bit more. So Zach, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Aaron. So as Aaron mentioned, we've been putting out research every quarter in our Propel Media Barometer, looking at what are the trends? What's the average journalist open rate? What's the average journalist response rate? How are PR professionals actually succeeding? What are the best practices? And we just launched our new barometer. PR Week and a couple other outlets just published on it today. And so we're going to dive into some of the highlights of what we found out by analyzing hundreds of thousands of real pitches that our users have sent through the Propel Gmail and Outlook plugins. And so first, we're going to dive into the updated average journalist response rate. So we've been tracking this metric for a long time, over a year and a half. And what we're noticing is that every quarter after quarter after quarter after quarter after quarter, it keeps going down. And it's concerning because, there's not that much more room to go. So if we look at, I'll start out here with the response rate. So in Q2, 3.25% of pitches were responded to. And in Q1, it was 3.37%. Last year, it was higher than that, around 4%. And, if we have a few more quarters and years of this trend going on, there's not that much more room for this to go until it hits zero. Now, the good news is we see that people who are using PR workflow technology and who are being really smart about how they manage their PR efforts and manage their relationships, people that are getting out of spreadsheets are seeing much more success. And we'll get into that in a little bit. We also noticed that the average open rate was 37.8%. So that's kind of an interesting stat. Martin, any initial thoughts on these benchmarks?
Yeah, well, one, I felt a little bit optimistic when I saw 38%, because that means, and even, taking into account those may be automated opens, that means we have a shot. Now, seeing the 3.25%, it almost says, okay, if you're in PR, you have a 97 or just under 97% chance of failing, which is not a great, great odds. But, if we can get beyond that, I think the opportunity is figuring out how we can get the journalists to take action when they do open our pitches. And part of this is, I think, a lack of understanding of what journalists want or need. Maybe it's because the organization or the agency requires you to do things a certain way and isn't paying attention to this kind of data to help, rejig or reformulate the way you pitch.
Yeah, it's I agree with you. The open rate is surprisingly high. And again, it's true that some manual or automatic opens, could be counted in that. There's no way to differentiate between those. But the fact that less than 1 in 10 of the pitches that are opened receives a reply is concerning, because I think there's a couple things going on. Curious to hear, your take, Martin. But I think, first of all, there's a lot of spray and pray going on, a lot of spamming. I think traditional PR technologies, PR media databases have kind of encouraged this practice of, exporting a big list, not having it be that refined, having no AI or machine learning that's really making those lists narrow and smart. And so instead of narrow casting their pitches, most PR users are going into one of the legacy databases, exporting a huge list and pitching out and spray and pray. So I think that's one thing. I think another thing is journalists are getting so many pitches that even if they are relevant, it's hard for them to have the time to respond, even if they were able to open it. So those are kind of my two takes on those numbers. Any additional insights, Martin, before we move to the next?
I think you make a great point, honestly, and this goes back. I started out as an entertainment publicist, so my stock and trade was pitching media, and I loved doing it. And over the years, you kind of refine it, hopefully. But I think one of the worst things that happened to us was broadcast faxing, where you could import a list from a spreadsheet onto your computer and print it to a fax, and it would just automatically fax 100, 200, 500 journalists. And that got progressively worse with emails, and now these humongous databases that you were mentioning, Zach. And I think really we need to go back to the time before that, where it was all about relevance and relationships. That's more important than ever. And that's one thing that you can use data to understand, but you can't really automate that part of it.
I agree. I think back in the area of carrier pigeons, you probably had one shot. You probably could send it to one journalist, and you really did your research. And then you're right, as platforms, communications platforms have expanded and communications has gotten so easy, people now just fire things off without even thinking, twice about it.
And one quick story though, that I used to, I've been doing this for so long that I used to send press releases by mail for a publisher that didn't have a big budget. And when we wanted to catch their attention, what we do is send it special delivery, and then I would get calls.
Wow, I love
anyone
that.
remembers what that is.
Wow, I love that. That's very funny. Okay, so if we go to the next slide here. So we analyze kind of what makes up a perfect pitch. according to the data. Propel, again, is a PR workflow platform. And we have thousands of users that use Propel to discover the right media to pitch, but then also to pitch them and to monitor their campaigns. And so we looked at hundreds of thousands of these real pitches, and we kind of boiled it down to a science of what's working best. So one of the interesting things we found is that really short subject lines work the best. So between 1 to 5 words is what journalists are most engaging with. We're seeing a 4% response rate on average to pitches that have 1 to 5 words in the subject. Now, what's really interesting is that if a pitch has more than 16 words, we see that response rate go down to half, only 2%. So the subject line length is a very important factor. And, anecdotally, we all know, you don't want to write an essay in your pitch and you don't want to write an essay in your subject line. But it's never until now been boiled down to like an actual, data-backed finding in PR that this is true. So Martin, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I mean, brevity is the soul of wit, an old saying, and clearly it shows that brevity is the soul of pitches when it comes to subject lines. What's, again, disheartening is seeing how many PR people, so over 42% have subject lines 10 to 15 words long. And so how can you, as a professional, figure out, okay, what is essential from this? Because you want to be creative, but you also want to be relevant. And how can you cut that down to its absolute essential so that when a journalist or an influencer, for that matter, opens it up, they see something that catches their attention. But it's, again, this isn't rocket science. Keep it short and you have a better chance of engaging, media.
Yeah, less is more, as they say. And I love your point because, yeah, I mean, if you look at these 4 cohorts, 1 to 5 words, 6 to 9 words, 10 to 15, and 16 plus, what's so remarkable is that the one cohort that has the least amount of pitches sent is the one that has the highest response rate. And, it reminds me of another interesting thing that, in one of our barometers last year, one of our competitors came out with a survey like a week before our barometer launched. And it said that the overwhelming majority of PR people think Friday is the worst day to pitch. And I remember I used to think that, and every single employee I had in my PR agency thought that. And anyone I ever talked to in PR thought that. It was like this, holy grail of PR, never, ever pitch on Friday. And I'm sure most of you guys listening felt that. I mean, feel free to write in the comments if you did, or if you have any thoughts about it. But we looked at the actual data and we saw that the Friday had the highest relative response rate out of any day. And so very interesting to kind of bust these myths. And I think this is a really important one because everyone listening, I mean, look at that 1 to 5 cohort. Look how few pitches are being sent with the 1 to 5 words. And then, knowing that it's the best response rate just, I think is powerful. If we
I want the names of the companies that are sending emails with 16 or more words in the subject line, because their clients, if their agency should know this and should either find someone new maybe, or get them into writing workshops.
Yeah, and to answer Jill's question, it was a blended rate for all Friday pitches, morning and afternoon. So if we go to the next slide, we also wanted to look at the length of the body of the pitch. not just the subject. And this is fascinating. Maybe I would say one of the top 2 or 3 metrics we've ever discovered. So what we saw was that if your pitch is between 150 between 50 to 149 words, you have 3 times the likelihood to get a response, 9.25%. And again, the overall average is just over 3%. Now, this is kind of mind-boggling. I mean, I think it just, kind of underlines the point that like no journalist wants an essay. Like if you can, share the high level, they don't have time to read through a long pitch. They're not interested in a long pitch, and they're not going to respond to a long pitch most of the time. Martin, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, this is where I think Twitter can be a great model to follow. What does it take in a tweet to get people to interact with it or to open it? And so you want to keep it brief, but you want to keep it interesting. One of the things that I've done successfully over the years is almost make it like a drip campaign or teasing it out. So the first one is intentionally short, just to gauge if there's interest. I mean, you want to tell a bit about the story. It's not just, I have a big surprise. And in doing that, what you do is you filter out some of the people who just aren't interested. So you give journalists and influencers enough that they can say, "Oh, I want to hear more," versus throwing everything in. It's like, okay, fine, I don't have time to look at this. I scroll down. If the email is going to take me more than 45 seconds to read, I'm not going to read it. I'm too busy. You're giving me too much work to do. So you want to, it's a tough balance, and it's different for everyone. It underscores the value of relationships, understanding who journalists are, but also thinking of them not only as journalists, but as people. Because I think one of the mistakes we make is we consider journalists and influencers as these intermediaries, which they are, but we don't attach humanity to them. And we need to do that to understand them. And in order to, start to build those relationships with them, so that they trust us. And so that we know, when we pitch, for me, when I used to pitch a lot, a yes was, of course, what I wanted. And so was a no, because a no meant, okay, thanks for thinking of me. There's another time. We'll have to figure it out again. Those 2 things I really liked. I hated, I'll get back to you, or nothing, because then you just didn't know. And I think if you have a relationship, you can get a yes or a no. Both are valuable.
Yeah, I really like that. And, it's like, it's a good point. I mean, the way we should, as PR professionals, be looking at pitch length is almost like in an empathetic way. Like, people are so busy. They have so much being thrown at them. Journalists have hundreds of emails coming a day into their inbox. Like, it's actually considerate to send them like a short pitch. Like, let them save, some time in their day, like don't ask them for this big commitment to read, an essay. So I think that, even from an empathy point of view, that kind of resonates.
Yeah, here's the story. Here's why. Do you want to hear more? And you're opening the door then a little bit. I worked at an agency, and the person I reported to, this was early on, they believed that you had to have a pitch that was longer than the news release that you were sending. Just in my gut, I knew that was wrong. Thank goodness you've got the data now.
Yeah, exactly. It's like dating. It's like sales. You wanna give a little. You don't want to jump into marriage on day one. You want to give a little bit of a pitch. Let them come back to you and say they're interested. Give them some more info and have it be this nice back and forth interaction rather than dumping this book onto them in your first email. Okay, so if we go to the next slide, and we have some great questions coming in, which we'll address in a little bit. So we also looked at the effect of including links in a pitch. And this was pretty interesting as well. So what we saw was that almost all pitches, over 2/3 of pitches, have 4 or more links embedded in the pitch. Now, this could be a link to your company's website, your client's website. It could be a link to a video, to whatever it might be. What we saw was that pitches with 2 to 3 links actually had the highest response rate. So again, you want to have a little bit of linkage so that the journalist can learn more. We find that attachments are a very bad idea. People are nervous about viruses. They don't want to download your attachment. Links are much better. They're a great way to allow the journalist to get more info without flooding the pitch with too much info. But it's a balance, and the best range is 2 to 3 pitches. I don't know if you have any commentary on that, Martin.
Well, a trend is emerging from these results, and that is it's all about prioritizing what's important, whether it's your subject line, what's in the pitch, how many links you're including. And unfortunately, for a lot of organizations and a lot of agencies, we tend to think our news is super big, and it is for us, but in the grand scheme of things, maybe it's not. And so we need to be able to step back, add a little bit of perspective, and know what we need to send to catch that attention, to just sort of ignite the spark in a way that hopefully will lead to coverage. And sometimes that's, if you're a B2B, going after a trade publication or a trade blogger who writes a very niche story, and that once, if you can make that happen, you can build out from there. So it has to do with your strategic approach too. And honestly, spray and pray, I don't think ever really worked, but now it works less, partially because you're alienating the people you're trying to reach. Journalists who are there are fewer, as you were saying, Zach, and they're time crunched and they're covering more. So if you're making it hard for them, all of a sudden you're hurting not only your relationship, but in some ways the relationship of the industry, because they start to generalize and go, oh, PR people don't know what we need.
Yeah, I really like that idea of mutual responsibility. None of us are pitching in a vacuum. We're all kind of representing this industry, and we all can play a part in either helping or harming the relationship with journalism in general. Yep.
Now, something I wouldn't mind seeing in a future report, if this is possible, and that is whether or not links embedded to anchor text, so added, to a phrase, work better than links that are in, here's a link to click on for more information, so they can actually see the keywords in the URL. I don't know which would work better for that, or if there'd even be any difference, but it might be an interesting thing to consider.
Yeah, that is a very interesting idea. We'll make a note of that to explore that. So going to the next data point, which is our last sort of significant finding that we're going to share from the barometer. And if you want to see the full barometer, you're more than welcome to download the report. We'll share a link to it in a bit. So which days are the best to pitch? And we've been looking at this for a while, like a year and a half. So what we saw was that from a sending perspective, the most pitches are sent on Tuesday, almost a quarter of all pitches. However, what we saw was that the response rate quite clearly was the best on Wednesday. Now, it's interesting because if we look later in the week, there's less competition of pitches. So from a relative standpoint, you may have a better shot of getting a response on a Friday, or perhaps a Thursday. Now, it's important to add to this that we've also looked in the past at how fast journalists respond to pitches, and we see that the overwhelming majority of responses come the same day. And that's where we can deduce that, if you're going to send if a quarter of pitches are sent on Tuesday, and most responses happen the same day, and yet Tuesday doesn't have the best response rate, probably not the best day to pitch. And I think that, this isn't rocket science. A lot of this is overrepresentation of pitches on Tuesday, floods the journalists' inboxes, so there's less responses. Underrepresentation of pitches on Friday, more breathing room for journalists, give them an opportunity to relatively respond to more pitches. And these things can always shift. So Friday is not a magic day. If everyone started to pitch on Friday, then the relative response rate would go down and it would go up in another day. Martin, what are your thoughts on this?
I think this shows that conventional wisdom isn't always the way to go, because the thing is, we're told, okay, Monday, journalists are really busy coming back from the weekend. If you have to pitch, you do, but switch to Tuesday. So we switched to Tuesday, and we're overwhelming journalists on Tuesday. And so you see the opportunities are Wednesday, Thursday, and maybe Friday. But then if we move over like that, I bet your results in a couple of quarters will say, hey, Monday's the opportunity. Because, we seem to move almost in sync with the industry, rather than saying, okay, knowing I have better chances on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, that's really good to know. But maybe I have a story that needs to go out on Monday. So how can I make it stand out? I think it goes to, again, social listening research, reading what the journalists and influencers have written. And that's something that I don't think enough people do, like read it and search their sites, and find out what they wrote about a year ago. Because sometimes in that story, you'll get a nugget of something else they're interested in that might relate to your brand or your client. And you can go, I remember this journalist is personally interested in shaving products or cars. I'm going to send them something because I think this might pique their attention. And that's, when you can really become successful, when you can sort of break out of the average mold of the Monday, Tuesday, and just stand out.
Yeah, exactly. I couldn't agree more. And I remember in one of our previous webinars, I also said this, that my favorite thing about this is what Martin said. It bucks the conventional wisdom, and it's like, don't follow the herd, herd mentality is very damaging. Everyone thinks Tuesday is the best day to pitch. And what happened? Yeah, everyone, Tuesday gets the most pitches sent. And what happened because of that? It has a bad relative response rate. And we're all about that at Propel. We're a challenger brand. We're really excited about, kind of bringing some innovation and disruption to an industry that, has kind of too much legacy thinking in certain ways.
Even what you're offering, just like public relations management, PRM, that shouldn't be such a novel concept in 2022.
Exactly. I mean, if a sales team was managing their contacts in spreadsheets in 2022, I can guarantee you that everyone on the sales team would be fired that day. But somehow with PR, even though it's very similar, I mean, we're all managing hundreds of relationships. We're, building these relationships where we're not selling a product or a service, but we're selling an idea, a story, to earn coverage. And yet 95% of PR professionals are still in spreadsheets. And so, that's what we're really trying to do at Propel is, bring all of your data, all of your contacts out of spreadsheets, centralize it in our PRM. And then because everything's in one place, you get to unlock these insights. And the beautiful thing is, you can see these kinds of insights for every journalist. You can see what's their global open rate? What's their global response rate? Do I even want to waste my time pitching them? Oh yeah, they have a great response rate. Awesome, I'm going to pitch them. Or this person has a 0% response rate. I'm not going to bother. So the point is, it's so valuable to get the data. And I love PR. I love the industry. It's always going to be a creative industry. Like creativity and building story ideas and building relationships is such a human creative thing. And PR will always be about that. But when you can combine that with data and with metrics, that's where the magic really happens, because the data can point you in the right direction. It can say, yes, this campaign worked really well. Okay, I'm going to do more of that.
Yeah, you can see patterns and insights from past interactions that'll shape the future. I want to go back to one thing about the herd mentality, though. For anyone on the webinar who is more of a junior practitioner, say, a lot of the herd mentality comes from managers who just like to do things the way they did and trust their gut over anything else. I think this is where, if you're younger, you need to kind of try to subtly nudge or educate them to look at things another way. And having the data to show that is something really good, because it's very hard to argue when you see a slide like this or a data visualization like this. You go, oh, okay, maybe we are doing it wrong, or maybe we need to adjust our approach. But you need that data and you need to be able to analyze it.
Yeah, I love that you brought that up. The PR industry has a very bright future, and it's the graduates coming out, and I know some of them are on the webinar that are going to lead that. So if we go to the next slide. So just assessing the state of PR pitching today, we have another poll to just get, sort of all of your guys' feedback and instincts on what do you think is the most problematic trait of a bad PR pitch? Is it the subject line being too long? Is it the pitch body being too long? Is it not enough context in the story? Or is it too many links or attachments? Would just love to kind of get the wisdom of the crowd here on what all of you are thinking. And we'll open up the results in just a minute. We'll give you a few more seconds to fill that out. Martin, do you have a gut feeling of what
No, I voted. I'm curious to see whether my vote, where it comes into it. So it's really hard to say. One thing, though, that's come out of this, and you mentioned creativity, I think the key to success is keep it short, relevant, and creative. And if you can do that with your pitch, you won't win every time, but you'll put yourself in a position where you are covered more often than not. And of course, I mean, you had Ginny Dietrich on I think the last webinar, a couple webinars ago, who created the PESO model, paid, earned, shared, and owned media. And I think we also need to understand that earned isn't everything, that we need to figure out where it all fits in that PESO model, and to sort of integrate our communications. And that includes, if you get a story from a publication, put some money behind it, boost it. Why not? Because suddenly what you've done is you've said to the journalist, not only thank you, but hey, what you've done is really important to me. And there's a chance they'll remember. It's all about reciprocity and, doing something for the journalist first before going to them with our hands up going, please cover me, please cover me. We need to give them something and constantly be aware of that.
Exactly. It's the more value you can offer them, whether it's helping them do a little bit of manual research or just being a resource for getting them sources when they need. It goes such a long way. All right, so our poll results came in. So 68% of people thought that the biggest problem with PR pitches today is too long of a pitch. Very interesting, which is extremely aligned with our data because we discovered that the pitches between 50 and 149 words have 3 times the response rate. So either you guys were listening really well or or you know, your instincts are just naturally really aligned with our data. But no, I mean, all kidding aside, this is so fascinating because I wouldn't have even known this at all when I was running my agency. I mean, I had a general concept that you don't want too long of a pitch, but to actually now be able to know, like, okay, let's really keep it between 50 and 149. I wish I knew that back then. All right, so just moving forward here, and we're going to open up for Q&A just in a minute or two. So just to kind of sum up, you know, journalists are looking for a short and relevant subject line. The best ones are between 1 to 5 words. They're looking for a concise pitch. They don't want an essay. It's better to not reveal everything in the first pitch. Give them a taste, give them an overview. And if they're interested, then they'll come back to you and you can give them more later. So again, for the body, stick between 50 to 149 words. Also, you know, in terms of links, 2 to 3 links is optimal. Of course, the baseline underlining everything is pitch the relevant people. You know, do your research. Don't spray and pray, don't spam. Build a really targeted media list. Use a PRM or another PR workflow tool to help manage that process. And you will see your response rate go up for sure. We've seen it across so many people, and there's a lot of hope. Moving forward, just a quick note here, you know, there's some great research tools to get more context, to get your media list narrowed to be really the right people. You'll want to look at their Twitter, see what they're tweeting about, see what their bios are about. Facebook can also be an interesting resource as well. So obviously, you know, you want to supplement your research with looking at their socials, of course, looking at their published articles as well. Moving to the next slide, just want a quick plug. We launched our free version of Propel last quarter. We're very excited to be the first end-to-end PR software that actually has a free version. And this goes to our core values of, you know, making PR more accessible, making it more democratized, lowering the barriers of entry. You know, we're the most affordable, we're public with our pricing, our packages are modular, you're not stuck with everything or nothing. So check us out, propelmypr.com/free. Link is in the comments or in the chat. And now the best part, we're gonna open up for Q&A. So Aaron, what do we got on the Q&A side?
All right. All right. Well, that was awesome. I learned a ton from that webinar. You guys are great. And there's just so much data in the barometer. So we did share that link also. So if you want to go head over and download that and get the full research study, it's all there. And we did send that out already earlier, and we can send it out again at the end of the webinar. So on to the questions, the best part. So one of the first questions we got over here was, do you think as PR people, we should be limiting the number of pitches we send each day? Or do you think there's an answer for cutting down pitch volume for journalists?
Martin, you want to take that first?
Yeah, I think the answer is yes to both. No, what you want to do is, it really comes down to figuring out who the best person is for any story, you know, the best person to reach. And I would say you want to prioritize your targets. So tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. Sometimes you might want to start with tier 3 and sort of build from, a groundswell from the ground up. Other times, you start with tier 1. I think another thing to understand, and this ties in with that question, is the concept of control mutuality. Control mutuality is part of a communications theory where you understand the power dynamic in a relationship. Most of us expect it to be about 50-50. I give you something, you give me something in return here. I'm giving you the opportunity for a pitch, you give me coverage. But really with journalists, it's like this. This is the journalist, this is us. So we have to figure out what we can do to balance it a little bit. And part of that is, the notion of relevance that you mentioned earlier and context. And just saying, okay, I know it's tough. Your bosses, for some of you, are saying, hey, you got to get it out to all these people. But doing that doesn't necessarily improve your odds. In fact, what it might do is it might harm relationships down the road because, journalists might remember that you're a spammer, or they might block you. And so that's what I think you need to do. And it's tough to prioritize. But
Yeah.
you do that and you have to have a plan.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think I wouldn't say to answer the question, I don't think there's necessarily a hard and fast limit. I think as long as you have a guiding philosophy that is there, each day, which is, I'm going to go for quality over quantity. I'm going for relevant people, for really targeted people. And yeah, to what Martin said, if anyone here, any recent grads or anyone has a boss that's, pushing for a very high volume of pitches, I think it'll be very helpful to have a PRM to show, look, here's my response rate, and like it's 4 times my colleagues. So even though I'm sending out, 20 pitches today instead of 200, look, I got, a 30% response rate. They got a 1% response rate. So yeah, I think no hard and fast rule, but stick to the general principles.
All right, cool. The next question we have over here is, how often do you recommend pitching the same person?
Well, we've done a lot in Propel to prevent over pitching so that you can have one contact profile that has the full history of all the pitches to that person. And I think it depends on are they engaging with those previous pitches? If they've replied to every previous pitch, and they've published some articles for you and the interactions have been good, then you can pitch them again. If you see that you've sent them 20 pitches and there's been no replies, then definitely don't. So it all depends on the engagement.
Yeah, I'd agree there. You want to be careful though, that because the line between spam and success is not a hard one to see. And that's where, having a PRM, as you were saying, where you can see who has gone out, who from that firm, either the company or the agency, has gone out to various media or influencers. You can say, whoa, we just sent them, a pitch yesterday and one 2 days before. I can't go out to them right now. Even if they're the most relevant person, you've got to figure out another way of connecting with them, because otherwise your agency will be seen, or your company. I have an agency background, so I naturally default to that, like you, Zach. But you'll be seen as too spammy. And again, the context of your story, where does it fit?
Awesome.
When I, one quick story, when I did PR, my agency did a lot of work for consumer packaged goods and a lot of beauty brands. And so when a new product would come out, that was great. But sometimes you'd have a brand extension, which is just a new logo, or it's extra moisturizing if it was for skincare. And that's not big news. It is for the brand manager. but it's not for the journalists. And I think that's where you need to have a good relationship with your organization and client too, to say, look, you know what, this isn't a launch, but here's what we can do and why we think that'll just help add to that groundswell of, coverage.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Okay, cool. The next question that we have over here is, do you have any advice for a PR newbie regarding making connections in COVID times? I feel as though virtual networking has been hard in my industry, trucking, supply chain.
So, I mean, I think that there are a lot of groups, PRSA. Martin is a veteran of PRSA, and Counselors Academy, IABC, that you can join. They have LinkedIn groups, they have, events that they do. So I think that could be a good place to start. Martin, you know a lot more about this than me.
Oh, I think those are all good. In Canada, the Canadian Public Relations Society, CPRS, which is the sister organization of PRSA in the US. I think that's a great place. Something else to do is to go to, when you identify, say, 4 or 5 key journalists that you want to build relationships with, and you start with a pitch, all of a sudden you're asking them for something before you've given them something in return. So what I used to like to do was, way before that, knowing that a client was coming with a certain product, I just send short notes saying, hey, I read your article on so and so. Make sure you understand who they are. Here's who I am. Here's what I'm doing. Are you interested in getting information? Just something as simple as that, as an introduction. And you don't expect an answer, but a lot of times you'll get a pretty good response to that, because you're breaking the mold. You're not saying, cover me, cover me, cover me. You're saying, hey, I really like your writing. I'm working in this industry, which you're covering. Can I send you stuff? You're asking for permission. And that, goes a long way to just building that relationship. Another way is connecting on LinkedIn with people. But again, with that note, which sometimes if you connect on a mobile device, just goes out automatically, add context to that. If you're connecting with a journalist, but also know they may not want to connect back with you because they don't know you. So you have to sort of plot it out strategically in the best way. I think a polite little introduction never hurts. And that goes for in-person events too. If you're meeting a journalist at an event, you might say, hi, here's what I do, but don't pitch them at the event. It's pretty obvious, hopefully.
All right, cool. I think we have time for maybe 1 or 2 more questions. So one of the questions we got here, which I actually love, it's always a great conversation starter, is, when do you think it would be appropriate to use an attachment in a pitch, or should this be avoided at all costs?
Yeah, so I mean, I mentioned, I think at the beginning that attachments are generally a no-no. Journalists are often worried about viruses. A lot of them work for large media outlets, which automatically block attachments. So definitely a best practice to avoid attachments. Put it in a Google Doc, share it as a link in the pitch. But yeah, I would definitely avoid attachments.
I would too, again, because you can't change an organization's IT settings ever. But what you can do is make it easier for the journalist or influencer you're trying to reach. And when you are doing that Google Doc, go the extra step and make sure you've clicked share, shareable to anyone with the link, because the worst thing that can happen, and we all make mistakes, is you send a link out, someone clicks on it, it's like, need permission. Go back and forth. You want to always go the extra mile and test things out too.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
All right, and the last question is actually very much around the barometer. How many pitches do you analyze for your pitching reports? But we'll drop another link, by the way, in the chat, so you can download that.
Yeah, so total, we've analyzed over 1.5 million pitches. Depending on specific stats, it's a minimum of 300,000 pitches. I think this quarter it was about 350 or so. And for certain stats, it's well over 1 million. So it just depends on which stat, but very, very large sample size. And the beautiful thing is these are all real pitches from a large variety of real PR users. You know, we're talking over 1,000 users. So it's quite a enormous sample.
Awesome.
Yes, you can really see. Can I say one quick thing before we go? And that is congratulations to you guys for being selected for Meta's startup program. I saw that just before. You didn't mention it, but I think that's really exciting news.
Thank you so much, Martin. I appreciate that. We're just really passionate about moving this industry forward. We're working day and night. We have people all over the globe working day and night to keep bringing innovation to PR. So we'll keep working on it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Martin, Zach. Thanks so much for the great insights and unpacking the data here. This is really valuable. For everyone that's been on the webinar, thank you so much for joining. We'll be posting a recap of this later once it's ready and sending that out to you if you want to go over any of the data again. And we also have shared over the barometer link if you want to do your own deep dive and look at some of the great insights we have. So feel free to check us out, sign up for freemium, or reach out to me if you have any other follow-up questions. And we hope to see you on the next webinar.
Thanks so much. Thanks, Martin. Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you. Bye.